Okay, I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. So, welcome once again. Today's lecture, we want to look at ICT policy planning. So far, we've had the introduction to ICT strategy. We looked at benchmarking. We looked at strategy planning in general, then specifically ICT strategy development. So now we want to look at, and you've also received an assignment on ICT strategy development as well. So now we want to look at policy planning. This course unit is called ICT Strategy and Policy Planning. Why policy planning? Because policy actually is implementing strategy. You're actually making decisions that are driving towards your strategic objectives. So let us start by asking ourselves, what is policy itself? Sorry, just give me a minute. This is not a full screen. Let me move this aside. Okay. Just give me a minute. I want to stop sharing. Okay, I'm not able to get my usual marker, but we can go on. Maybe if I can use this one. Okay, I think this should be able to do for us. So the first question is, what is policy? Let me get marker there. What is policy? Can we have just a discussion on what we think policy is? Just what we think. We don't need anything textbook. Yes. Marcelino, then and then Alvin.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. On my side, I believe policy can be a set of rules we set for ourselves to govern us as we go forward with our goals in the company.
Yes, thank you. That's a good one. Alvin next, then Ogola.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Everyone, I think policy can be regarded to be a set of, should I say, procedures that we are meant to follow to achieve strategic objective.
Yes. I think that one is a fair one. That's a fair one. Ogola, yes, please.
Thank you, Doctor. I think policy is it's a senior management direction towards achievement of an organization's goals. There has to be senior management endorsement for it.
Yes, that is very true. Thank you, Ogola. I think those are really good contributions. Let's see. Can this move? No. Oh, sorry. So, sorry, I think I can't get the point again. So, the term policy, what does it mean? When we look at it from an organizational perspective, I think especially what you've given, that is extremely, I think it's straight on. But we also have to note that policy can be used in different contexts. We see it being used at government level. And at government level, it's almost similar to organizational level. They are basically principles by which government is guided on what to do. And they are clear objectives. It's also used to achieve government objectives or party objectives. In other cases where we've seen the term used is in policy, in insurance policy. And this one is basically a legal document. It's a contract between the insurer and the person who is being insured. So there are certain terms and conditions that say if you fulfill these conditions, we shall be able to give you insurance coverage for whatever may happen to you. Now, at management level, and this is what we're interested in, again, it's very similar to what is at government level, where you have a set of basic principles and guidelines which are there to be enforced by the governing body, and they give direction and tell us what we can do and what we may not do. So when we look at basically the meaning of policy, we are looking at a set of actions, a selected set of actions. You have other actions you can take, but you have this set of actions which you've all agreed upon that this is what we need to, this is how we are going to deal with ABCD. So the policy itself is set in a way that is very similar to decisions you make, and then those decisions being implemented. Yeah. So usually policies are long-term, very similar to a strategic plan. So usually also when they expire usually around about the same time as the strategy itself. Later on, we shall actually see it's the same as strategy. It's a living document. Your policy statement is a living document. So why do we have policy? We have policy to prevent abuse of IT resources. Why do we have ICT policy specifically? Prevent abuse of IT or ICT resources. Now we know ICT resources are very good. ICT can help us do very many things, but ICT can also be abused. Over the Easter weekend, I was in Kampala. I had a colleague's wedding. Some of you may know him, Peter Kalema, and I needed a dress to go for the wedding. And being that I've not I've really spent a long time without being in Kampala. I was not ready to start moving in town, going to shops, looking for a dress. So my sister went online, went to Instagram, I don't know, all the social media sites, and found a dress and put in the order, and the dress came home. So that was IT being put to very good use. We are here studying online. We are putting ICT to very good use, but ICT can also be used in a terrible manner. Yeah, very terrible manner. I remember there was a situation when I just started the early years of working at UMU. There was an incident that happened, I think, what we now know as Airtel. When one of the managers, top management in Airtel, what we now know as Airtel, went out on a weekend with a female colleague. And during that weekend, they took pictures. And I think he saved the pictures on his laptop. At a certain point, the laptop had an issue and he took it to the IT department. And one of the people there discovered the pictures, copied them, and decided to make them very public, extremely public. So of course, it was a really big scandal. So that was a situation where somebody misused ICT resources, an organization's ICT resources. We have seen other cases, even at UMU, I'm sure the ICT department can tell us, and all of you can tell us different situations where ICT resources were misused in one way or the other. So policy is one of the things we ensure we put in place to guide, first of all, to give warning to users, to give guidance to the organization in case ICT is misused. What do we do? Two, it is also to protect the ownership of information resources. Once you have information of any kind, it's privileged. Yeah, it's privileged information. So we want to protect that information. You also want to protect the employees so that they know what they should and should not do. Also to protect them from, protect their information. The policy here also tells us that it gives guidance on decision making for the IT department. So for example, when ICT is misused, or that when an organization is collecting information, how does ICT help management or help the organization to protect that information? The ICT policy also helps us to incorporate governance, yeah, to integrate corporate governance into IT so that IT is not left simply hanging there. Finally, one of the most important is to meet regulatory, legal, and ethical requirements. When you're developing strategy and policy, one of the important things you must think about is how the external environment affects the organization. So here, practically, we input the regulatory requirements. Take an example, data protection and privacy. You have to look at the Data Protection and Privacy Acts of Uganda, Computer Misuse Act, and so on and so forth. You have to incorporate them in your policy, that to ensure that the laws are not broken, or also to protect yourself as an organization. Yeah, protect yourself in case an employee does something that is outside of the laws of Uganda. The organization itself is protected, saying, as much as the employee did this, it's not, the organization already has a law, and this person has done that as an individual. Do we have any questions so far before we move further? If no, let's move on. So where do ICT policies fit in an organization? Where do they fit? One of the things, like when we discussed the last sessions we had, we talked about how policy, how ICT or any strategy or policy for any department, it's not only ICT that has strategy and policy, all departments should have. For example, here are things like HR policy. That HR policy, of course, must be attached to some strategy. So when it's being developed, it's being done together with top management and board. The board of directors gives guidance to what they want, what they expect to see. They give guidance to the management team. So for the board of directors, it's a tool to evaluate top management. Evaluate top management, give direction, and also monitor top management. So like we said, we've been talking about all along, we've said ICT should have a seat at management level. That's the purpose of having the CIO or CTO, the Chief Information Officer or Chief Technical Officer or Technology Officer. So that's the purpose of having that position in HR, in the personnel structure, and also to ensure that that person is sitting at management level. So that ICT department, that the policy becomes a tool that the board of directors can evaluate, direct, and monitor. The policies and procedures described are used as guidance and also steps to conduct work and actions and decisions. So for the IT department itself, it's a guiding tool as well. Then for management, it is used, the policy is used to implement the business objectives in IT. Yeah. So it's used by the head of department, head of ICT, to guide, to implement the business objectives in IT. So here we have a series of intersecting sets which indicate where the ICT policy fits within the organization. So on this side, we have the corporate governance side, interacting with the CIO, who is at management level. This person, this individual, he or she is being monitored, directed, and evaluated based on the policy. Then for the policies and procedures, these are guiding principles, not just for the ICT department, but for the overall organization. When you look at the ICT policy, it doesn't only guide ICT, but it also guides everyone else. For example, if you have a policy on a password policy, it guides everyone when they're creating their individual passwords for accessing systems, for whatever it is. If you have a policy on device use, how you should use the organizational ICT resources, they guide all users, and so on and so forth. And finally, for IT management, it guides, it supports the CIO and the head of IT department on how to run ICT resources within the organization. Do we have any questions so far?
Sounds okay, Doctor.
Okay, so let's move on. So we had mentioned earlier, but Doctor had mentioned it, I think, earlier, how the ICT policy is operationalizing the ICT strategy. So the policy itself, we start with developing the strategy, then we develop the policy. So the policy is basically looking at the strategy. It's putting it into operation. Now, if you've ever seen an ICT policy, it's a very big document, quite big, but it covers all the sub-policies underneath, are usually covered in these three areas: in training, security, and procurement. So even when you're talking, if you may have a policy on password, it's on security. If you have a policy on data protection and how data should be kept, that's under security. If you have a policy on outsourcing, it's under procurement. Whatever it is, all of these sub-policies are under this. So basically all the policies usually fall under, they usually tend to cover these three areas. So that is key. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have seen a policy, or you may have actually been involved in developing an ICT policy. If you have seen it, can some of you give us example of sub-policies under an ICT policy, if you've seen any? Yes, Ogola.
Thank you, Doctor. I think it could also include the things like the password policy I talked about, internet use policy, internet use, then email use.
Yes.
email, social media. I don't know whether it can be a standalone, but it could also be included in the ICT policy.
Yes, thank you, Gola. So you can already see, some of you have already actually seen, interacted with an ICT policy. So we are not speaking anything new about this. Now, usually sections, not all of the ICT policy, but sections of the ICT policy may be included in an employee's contract, especially those policies which guide on ICT use. Yeah. And certain prohibitions, what you should or should not do with organizational ICT resources. So usually it is placed within the contract, and the employee is supposed to sign to say that they are ready and willing to adhere to those policies. And should they not, should they not do it, there are certain disciplinary actions that may be taken against them. So we can just have a discussion on one policy. What would a policy cover? So here are just some questions on what a policy would cover. It would cover a training policy, would let's say cover who is eligible for training. So for example, you may state any new employees must be trained on all required systems. Then we can also have for continuous trainings for certain systems that one may easily forget. So there's also that continuous training. Then, or if a new system is introduced, so you indicate who is eligible when the trainings will be conducted. Then there are trainings for specific jobs. For example, you may have systems that are specific to finance, but not necessarily to marketing, things like that. The type of trainings that will be had, should they be in-house? Will we have e-learnings? So for example, if you have a corporate organization which is geographically spread, and you may not have the resources to move trainers from one site to another, then you might think about e-learning. Then there are those where you think about external courses where you may need someone from outside, from outsourcing training. You may have a guest speaker. So what type of training will be used? Then who will monitor the training? Who will be the responsible person? The funds for training, where will they come from? What things might you consider before writing a training policy? You may think about skills audit. Yeah, what are your staff members' skill levels? Take an example. You may find yourself with staff members who are computer illiterate, or others, it goes beyond the computer, even other ICT. We always think about computers, but there are other ICT systems that we use. For example, the mobile phone is now a device used for work. You may weigh in on in-house or external training. So these are some of the things you may consider before writing your policy. Now, we may not have to do this. You can do this maybe after the class. And we can incorporate this in tomorrow's discussion as you present. You've looked at the Clarion School for Boys. You can have a brainstorming session on what could be included in an ICT policy for the Clarion School for Boys. You can have that discussion tomorrow. And these are some of the questions you can use to guide you. So please bear in mind, these slides are already there on Moodle, so you can access them from there. What would a security policy include? What is it, first of all? So here we are looking at what we need to protect in terms of the information assets. So in other words, you must have a very good idea of what information do you have, where is it stored, and how do we protect it, and from who? Who should we protect it from? Do the systems that we have, are they able to provide that kind of protection? So that is what we are looking at. So that policy lays down the procedures employees, that is users, and even ICT, what they must follow to protect data, any data that they are handling. So for example, if you think about your organizations, you have different types of data, but not all of them are actually accessed by ICT, or ICT is not the owner of this data. So for example, let me give an example. Let's think of example of UMU. You have students' data. This student's data is different, differs from depending on where the student is interacting. So you have the registry department, which may deal with students' personal information, describing them, for example, your name, your certificates, what certificates, academic certificates do you have? They may also hold your results. Then you have your lecturer. Your lecturer may hold your raw results that before they go to registry. Your lecturer will hold your coursework information and any other thing. For me now, as the lecturer, I hold information on our lectures, our regular lectures. I have that information in my custody. So we have all these different levels. So how do I handle, for example, our Zoom recordings when we are done? How do I handle those? What do I do with that information? Do I go and start sharing it with, let's say, with the factory which I deal with? Do I go sharing that kind of information? So the policy should guide me as a lecturer how I should take care of this information. Yeah. The policy should also cover security, physical security, and data security, and so on and so forth. It also focuses on privacy of data. So now, as we are discussing, if you ever see an ICT policy, you may find all these are actually sub policies. One on physical security, other one on privacy of data. Yeah. Now, here is a question I want to ask all of you. What's the difference between security of data and privacy of data? What do you think is the difference between the two?
Can I explain something?
Yes, please.
I can explain those two by giving an example.
Yes,
For
please.
example, with the security of data, I may give an idea. There is firewall where this data is stored. So that is it. We are ensuring security for that information which goes across those emails. But for privacy, so many people have been asking our emails, whereby they know that maybe ICT may be checking in with their messages. So we by ensuring privacy, there's no way ICT can see what is happening in certain account unless you have that password. However, that password can be reset, but somebody may get notified due to that two-factor verification.
Yes, thank you so much, Emmanuel. Thank you for that, that good example. I think the example gives a clear distinction between the two, security of data and privacy of data. So it's also key, like, for example, a new system comes in to be able to say who should access this, information and who shouldn't access it. For example, if you have results of students, who should access those results and who shouldn't? We know that the student should, because those are his or her results. The faculty should, especially the faculty administration, should be able to access those results. Registry. Beyond that, it becomes something else. It's a little bit of something else. Now, for me as a lecturer, I may give results for a particular course unit, but I may not access other. For example, I shouldn't access your your results, let us see on, you have a course unit, I think, on security with Dr. Sanya. I shouldn't access those results because I didn't teach that course unit. I'm not responsible, and that therefore I have no right to know what has transpired between you and the course unit, the module. So that there in any system we're accessing, for example, we use Moodle. I shouldn't be able to access that course unit on Moodle. That's one example, or any other system where this information may be. So as Emma says on security, it's those protocols that the ICT department implements to ensure that this data is kept safe. That's just one of the examples. So here are things that must be there in the security policy. So one is to be able to identify potential threats that may come in. So the ICT department must also keep abreast or keep regularly informed on potential threats that exist. The security policy must indicate who is responsible for data security. There is a responsibility for the ICT department, but then there's also a responsibility for the user. I remember at one point, I think the ICT department sent out a communication telling us about security of our emails and telling us that they've set the system to regularly to prompt us to change our passwords. So it was putting responsibility into our hands as email users of the email system. The policy must also indicate what resources are needed to maintain security, so that at all times it's included in budget and management is aware. Yeah. Indicating to the staff members what things they can do to prevent misuse of information assets. For example, I gave you the example of when the ICT department at UMU prompted us to change our passwords on a regular basis. There should also be procedures to protect against virus and any other physical security attacks. Also, the disciplinary actions that can be taken in case there's breach of security. So these are the things in summary that should be contained in a security policy. One is a definition of information security. That's an example, that the thing that should be there, information security. What are the objectives? What is the scope? And the importance of security for information. There should be a statement of management intent. So here, this statement is basically saying how management intends to support the goals and principles of information security. There should be a framework for setting for controlling objectives. Yeah, a framework to control the objectives, including risk management, risk assessment, and risk management. So you can also actually have a sub-policy which is talking about risk assessment and risk management. Information security policy. So before I move here, do we have any question? If not, let's move on to information security policy. So what is it exactly? So here, this policy specifically is guided by the national legislation and regulatory requirements that exist. So if you're in the ICT department, you should be aware of the different policies and acts which guide on information security. Two, it should have a section that guides on business continuity. So for example, if you have any breach or any threat towards the information assets, you should have a risk management plan that backs, that ensures that data is not lost in case of anything. So, for example, you should have a backup on as a policy on information backup, a backup policy that should be there. Then the consequences in case of policy violations, the disciplinary actions. You should have a policy on network security. So things like a password policy, those are key. Usernames, how you the official usernames that should be accepted by any system user. Yeah. How data should be transferred across networks. So here, internet usage, data encryptions and firewalls. This is where we put all of these things. Change control and monitoring, looking at security logs, use of laptops, or in situations when we talk about bring your own device. Yeah, if you bring your own device. So those are also sub-policies. Backup and recovery. Yeah, this is the business continuity management. So what should the information security include? Number one, again, just the same thing as the other one. You should have a definition, you should have goal objectives of that policy, and then have the policy statements, which are basically the guidelines, guiding principles. So it's important that all staff members know about the security policy. Yes, Ogola, do you have a comment or question?
A question, Doctor.
Yes,
just please. In the kindly go back to the previous slide.
Okay.
Yes. So, Doctor, I just I'm requesting to understand if these facets that you've mentioned are the conclusive expected subsections of an InfoSec policy. Is it following some sort of standard? Is it best practice? Because at times maybe you go through an audit, someone comes, maybe this auditor comes this year, someone says you don't have change control. Another time, another one comes, you don't have. So maybe what I'm trying to inquire is this the fully, the full composition that is expected in an InfoSec policy? Or
Now,
there are others?
this one, of course, is following best practice. But, however, I also want to warn that situations change, our environment changes. Today, backup is important, and tomorrow something else will be important. So it is important to keep abreast. Also, I think the auditors are the ones who also help us to keep abreast of some of these things. This course unit is giving you the best practice, but I can't tell you this is it, the full thing. Tomorrow something else will come up. A new law is going to be enacted, connected to security. What do you do? Yeah. So we have developments, especially in ICT, constantly. So these ones so far what we do know are best practice. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
So I think we're finished also this slide. Then we come to procurement policy. So this one, of course, covers on acquisition of new ICT hardware. Yeah. What we want to ensure is, first of all, consistency and compatibility, that whatever new system, whatever new device we get, it's compatible with the current network that we have, and also scalability. Yeah. Two, we want to be able to take advantage of bulk purchases. So if we say we are only purchasing this type of equipment, then we take advantage that we are going to buy this number of computers for so many and of this particular type. So you know that you're buying something in bulk, and you take advantage of any discounts and any other perks that may come with bulk purchase. Also, when we have a procurement policy, especially saying we have standards of what we should or should not buy. We ensure that we are reducing on maintenance and support costs. If you have one thing that is working for all at the same time. The procurement policy should also include standards on replacement. For how long should an employee use a computer? Of course, this also depends on the resources of the organization. You may have computers that are very old and you're not able to replace. So the time scale also should be in relation to, of course, your actual situation as an organization. So ICT should be fully aware of the resources that are available to the organization. The procurement policy should also cover disposal. When do you dispose of obsolete equipment, and how do you do it? Yeah, when do you dispose of it and how do you do it? Basically, that ends our session for today. Do we have any question? Do we have any question? Any question, or maybe I confused you more than I helped?
Doctor, not from my side. I think you actually clarify it was crystal clear.
Okay.
From my side. And maybe just an inquiry on how to how I request that maybe you upload these the recording.
Yes, the recording. Yes. The first two I've already sent to David. Maybe Emma can help me and push David to upload them and send me the links. Then this one I'll send it immediately also to him so that I upload the links as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So if we have no question, maybe I can leave you to enjoy your Friday evening. We prepare for tomorrow morning. Okay?
Okay, doctor.